So
Is there a report due prior to that date?
not that we know of.
Okay.
It just says, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the language is just saying it's updated now.
Briefly.
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Welcome. Kashi. So, the MI&D task force now has been, the duties of the task force has been expanded to include expungements of prior MI&D commitments. And the deadline for us to now submit a report is August 1st of 2026, not 2025. So we have, it's been postponed by a year, or we've been given a year.
Okay.
So towards the end, or maybe towards the middle of the meeting, we'll also talk about who would like to be part of working on that specific language. As Sue mentioned, it doesn't happen a lot, but now that that is one of the tasks for this task force, we would need to consider some language.
And we can also decide to finish this work and then do the expungement too, so that people aren't stretched to them, because again, we have a lot of time and I don't think there's a lot really discussed about expungement.
Any questions? Okay. All right, so with that, we will first go to Robin Bodie, who is representing the work from objectives 7 and 8. And I know that you guys have been meeting, we've met quite a few times, and so if you would just want to summarize some of the work that you've done.
To summarize, we came up with 3 recommendations that we all agreed on. And the first 2 were regarding a voluntary return to the forensic mental health program. So for the first one, for people that are coming back for a medical reason only, they're clinically stable, but for medical reasons only, and that could be a person had a stroke or long COVID or something where they couldn't stay in their placement and they could not find like a rehab facility or a nursing home that was willing to take that person. They could return to our campus for up to 6 months. Previously, it was 30 to 60 days, but recognizing that there have been times where you need just a little bit longer. And if it's for medical reasons only, since it's intensive rehab, PT, OT, all of that, the group recommends up to 6 months. For a person that needs to come back,
Just one question about this.
Sure.
So we're saying that someone who could return on a voluntary return basis, so would not have to go through the special review board
right.
process, that person could have come up to 6 months.
Yeah, we're recommending that that statute be amended to be allowed up to, right. So voluntary medical readmission with the consent of the head of the treatment facility or state operated treatment program, a patient may voluntarily return from provisional discharge for a period of up to 6 months for medical reasons with the consent of the designated.
Okay, and would the setting matter at all? Would it just be for?
We did not specify the forensic nursing home. I mean, one of the reasons I think was because what if they're totally full and we could maybe utilize a bed in Linden or Klein? I mean, they're secure. And they have higher nursing ratio. So
Sure.
in the event that there wasn't the nursing home bed, I
Okay,
mean, it wouldn't prohibit the person if they really needed to come back for medical reasons for that. So that would be, and this is in our minutes.
So maybe we should just stop and talk about that one.
Sure.
yeah,
I mean, one thing I'd like to add, at least in the report on that one, is that I've actually been working with the Behavioral Health Division on the whole nursing home screening. So, yes, we have to do it according to the feds, right? Except that the way the language is makes it really difficult. Does someone need like extra care due to their mental illness, something along those lines? But the extra care could just be, well, they have medications to take. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to need a one-to-one or anything like that. And it doesn't really let you get beyond that. And we've had people who, not that they were not committed as MI&D, but had pretty serious mental illnesses, but they were dying of cancer and needed to be in the hospice program or other kinds of things. And so I think that's actually prevented a lot of people with mental illnesses under the age of 65 being able to get into a nursing home because of that screening document. So I think we should also include in there that is a barrier for people where then it's like they have to come back to you because they can't get into a nursing home somewhere else because of that screening document. So we're working with MI&D to try to change that. So there can be like a second series of questions. They said they can't change language because of the feds, but there should be another series of questions to see, what is it that they really need? It could be that they would fit in just perfectly with one regular person. Can you accommodate 6 months? That's my only worry, with knowing that it's already hard to get in.
It's only happened, we just told that before, 4 times in the last year or two, but it's enough that, I mean, even one matters. And if a
Yeah.
person would benefit by being able to hopefully go back to their placement or a similar placement, rather than having to go start all over. Fortunately, I wish it would affect a lot more people, but it doesn't.
Well, the reality is too, we had to revoke the main legal defense key for your just to have the company. Yes, once.
We felt good about that one. That was an easy one for our group. The next one that we came to consensus on is right now the current language for a voluntary return, just in general, is 30 days up to 60 days with the medical director approval. We supported changing that from 30 to 60 to 60 to 90. Again, recognizing that sometimes people just need a little bit more time, and just giving them that extra month could make a difference between losing a placement and having to start all over, go to the review board, wait a year to get a review board hearing, that's 6 to 9 months. So feeling pretty good about that one also. Cassie helped us out. We have thought that maybe the reason it was set so tight, 30 to 60 before, was because of the need for mid-choice assessments and how long, those were in effect, but she checked into that with her group and found out that has been extended, so we wouldn't have to do a brand new assessment if they stayed a little bit longer. That assessment would still be good. We wouldn't have to redo that. So, language, again, is just a very simple change, just changing from 30 to 60 to 60 to 90.
Any questions about that, comments from folks? So far, the recommendations have been for voluntary return. One is for medical reasons only, we could extend up to 6 months, and then the second would be for voluntary return up to 60 days to extend up to 90 days.
That's that little bit extra.
Okay.
And then our last one might be a little bit premature. I think, Alan and Faith were gonna look into this language change that we were proposing. In statute, it says secure treatment setting facility means the Minnesota Security Hospital. We had talked about now being the time to change it to the Forensic Mental Health Program, formerly known as Minnesota Security Hospital. But we didn't know if we could change it there or if it would have to be changed in lots of other places. So they were gonna check into that, but if it doesn't mean, because we have to match up. Things have to match up.
Yeah, that's just a direction to the advisor's office to change it wherever it appears,
Oh. That's good.
because you're not changing the definition.
Well, that leads to some of the, at least a couple things that we talked about that wasn't, that we didn't come to consensus. So, go ahead, Becky.
Does it make a difference that Minnesota Security Hospital previously implied all the secure units? It was a secure setting. If I'm recalling right, it said
It does say
secure setting is defined as Minnesota Security Hospital and MSOP. And so I just wonder now that the Forensic Mental Health Program has both secure and non-secure units, if the outcome would be the same.
Well,
I don't know.
you can frame it just saying the secure units at the hospital.
Yep. I didn't know if that made a difference.
When I had to change all the emotional disturbance to mental illness, I actually had to go through each one, in a word search of all of the statutes in the state of Minnesota. to make sure that if we changed it, it wouldn't change the meaning.
Good,
So we can do the same.
similar process.
Says peer treatment facility means Minnesota Security Hospital, but does not include services or programs administered by the security hospital outside of secure environment.
There we go. So that works.
We're just changing Minnesota Security Hospital.
To the forensic mental health.
Yeah, so that works.
If it doesn't do direction where they go across the boards like that, there shouldn't be any issues that they've actually. Robin.
Good. Thank you for looking that up, Anne.
So that was our three recommendations. We had originally, way back when we started, talked about the possibility of including some exclusionary language in the commitment statute. And what was brought up was to make it more match, I can't remember the statute, who is really good at statute, but that our definition would be the same as the definition of mental illness under civil commitment. But we did not agree on that, so there was not support to make any changes for that. But I brought up, one of the ideas was maybe exclude people with intellectual disabilities or TBI or on the autism spectrum, stuff like that. But what our group talked about then was the fact that those people that are committed to MI&D have demonstrated dangerous behavior. Whether it was because of a disability, and because we don't have services throughout the state that would be able to serve people, we end up having to put people in jail or other hospitals, and that's not right either. So there was not support to change that data or change that language. Did I get that right? Can somebody say it?
I think there was that consensus to change that language. I think there were a number of us that supported looking at a
Right.
change, but
Right.
it didn't result in consensus.
No, it was split. So that didn't make it into our recommendations.
If the only reason to not change the definition is that there isn't a place for people to go, I mean, what if it's, contingent, saying, the group would be open to changing it if the state created a place for them to go. That wasn't necessarily the security hospital, but that actually was a more secure setting.
Because I think the concept too, that this security hospital or FMHP is really not the right treatment program for these people, that part of it, we all really kind of agreed on in terms of the problem for us. It was just sort of the resolution or how to solve it and what is needed to achieve that consensus, correct?
I think that was accurate, that because there isn't a better alternative. We don't have the neurobrain unit anymore, and that program used to be able to accommodate, it was 14, 18, whatever, but now it's down to 7. It was like, and we don't have MIDO, which previously served a very large number of people with behavioral issues, and that doesn't exist anymore. And people had gone through that, just saying, so.
The young and adolescent.
Yes, the young and,
Yeah.
the YAP program doesn't exist anymore. So we have people that are falling through the cracks, and nobody feels good about them sitting in a jail cell. Or, and we also feel bad about them they can't all go to Anoka, because then, there's this backlog and people have to leave the state to get treatment, and hospitals can't serve other people because we have people that don't have anywhere to go holding up a bed.
And I think this is where we didn't reach consensus because it became a discussion about resources.
Right.
Because we said if these resources existed and the person was still committed, mentally ill and dangerous, they would just go into one of those resources. So was it a problem, the definition, or was the problem resources?
Right.
And I think we all agreed the problem really was resources, that narrowing or tailoring it to exclude those individuals does not in any way serve that population. And so then we started dreaming resources, and that wasn't really on this objective, our
Right.
directive.
We talked a lot about what were group 5 and 6 are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too. We like that idea, and but again, that wasn't ours, so.
Well, I would certainly put it as a placeholder in case it doesn't come up later. So we don't want to lose that concept.
I just don't want anything written in there about contingencies, because I don't think that is a fair statement to put forward now for any future groups to say it's contingent on something that doesn't exist.
Which, speaking of, contingency. We had talked, I had brought up a question about the way the language is written. Find the exact language. It was about, the written treatment report shall be filed by the treatment facility or treatment program with the committing court within 60 days after commitment. If the person is in the custody of Commissioner of Corrections, when the initial commitment is ordered, the written treatment program must be filed within 60 days after they admit to the state operated treatment program or treatment facility. I had brought up that I kind of felt it's unfair that we're admitting, people are getting a final D while they're in jail. So they aren't getting any they aren't getting behavioral health treatment, there aren't behavioral health observations. It didn't seem fair that they didn't get the same grace period or that a person who's coming from corrections, Department of Corrections get. But that was another one where, help me out, guys, why that wasn't supported. I know it wasn't supported, so there was no consensus on that. But I brought up that, for those people that we do admit from jail, it just seems unfair to them that they come with a final D.
I think we talked a lot about that. It's taking over a year for people to admit from the jails, and so that's prolonging these cases and giving no finalization, which is, I think Cassie brought up, is also been shown to have detrimental impact on these clients.
Right.
Because it's just out there in the middle of nowhere, but also, I mean, there's just, again, I think the counties would be more agreeable to that if the admission time period were actually a reasonable amount of time. But now we'd be waiting a year plus than 60 days, and it just, I don't think we can agree to anything that extends the time that a person is in limbo. It's too much.
I think we ended up talking about resources again.
Yes, right, right, that if they didn't have to wait there, if we had somewhere where people could go
Yes,
and get the behavioral health observations.
right. Then I think there would be consensus.
Right.
Because I think nobody agrees that receiving the D while you're in jail is
Fair.
So again, we talked about changing the statute isn't gonna fix the problem, it's just gonna acknowledge the problem, and what we want is the problem fixed, and so it came back to resources.
And that should be included in the report. That a lot of these issues and the problems that we're seeing can't be solved without investing more resources. And so I think that those things should be put in the report, for, future legislative sessions. Sometimes it takes a while, right? But I would still make sure that those recommendations are in the report. For
And
resources.
I'm just saying, I don't know if there was a good discussion about it because we couldn't get past the
Right.
resources. So I'm not even saying there would be a consensus if
Right.
those things change, but we couldn't even get past the resources hiccup.
Yep.
Which is, I think, reflected in groups 5 and 6 or whatever groups were the.
Yep.
Because it was a lengthy synopsis that Cassie had put together.
Sorry, someone was about to say something.
I just feel like the state's has obligations to put resources forward for the population that we're talking about. And if it's not in the report, it's not gonna progress further the next time around. So we have to find out if there is consensus and we have to highlight those. Because that's the only thing that's gonna improve the system and improve that jail issue and getting people real timely assessments. Even if they can just pause there and get them to the forensic mental health program and then do the 30, 60 days. And then for the resources for individuals with autism, traumatic brain injury, and intellectual development disability, we have to develop something. But I know it takes time, but I just really want those highlighted in the report, because if they're not, then the next legislative session, when we continue to work on it, or when we try to advocate or push for that, we'll have that tool in order to use that to try to get that population into a place that's going to be better for them.
We can absolutely include it as discussion, but I think we also have to note that the group was very clear that we don't want to make a recommendation if it has contingencies. If it's based on, so if we had this, then we'd be okay with it. But we can, I just want to make sure that part is clear, because we really did talk about these things over and over and over again.
And I think 5 and 6, that group did list out the want for those resources.
Yes.
Period. Like it
Yep.
doesn't have to be contingent on anything. It's just, it should be a resource right now.
It should be a resource right now.
Yeah.
And considering those individuals and the families, where they can't progress at forensic mental health program, and it's not a good option for them or the other patients or the treatment teams that are there. It's just so evident.
And we talked about that. We
Yeah.
talked about a very, of it being an issue where if a client that doesn't fit the milieu, because of their other disabilities, has to be on a unit that could potentially serve 12 to 14 people, but they can't tolerate that, so they're on a unit by themselves. So we're staffing that unit for one person where we know there's a large waiting list. That we could potentially be serving more. But where else could that person go? I mean. Do you want to keep going? No, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, the report, it's really critical that it include, from my perspective, a recommendation to develop those resources, right? Not contingent on anything, not whatever, but just acknowledge the problem
Yes.
that stands before us and what we need to solve with. Frankly, not a one size fits all recommendation. I think that we need a continuum of options for people to really be able to meet folks where they're at and to deliver truly person-centered care that they're entitled to, frankly, as individuals subject to civil commitment and all that entails.
I think work group 5 and 6 is really clearly laid out that too.
I think it makes sense to highlight it in a couple of ways. I mean, we have the recommendations for the resources, but I think highlighting these gaps that we're talking about is great too. I think the only way that I'd be worried about it is if it started to suggest things that could be done that we don't have the resources for, but highlighting the gap and then also recommending resources, I think is important, yes.
I mean, it's easy enough to say that it may not be the most appropriate place for them to be because they can't progress through the system. But currently, there are no other resources.
Right.
Because it leaves the door open for the future, frankly. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gone through past reports in the last 20 years, looking at recommendations and saying, oh, you know what? I think this time we could actually get this one, even though it's 10 years later. So I still think it's important to highlight, the problems we couldn't fix this one because there's no resources.
It's just gotta be worded appropriately, because it's not the most appropriate, but it is the most appropriate that is available in the state.
Right, but we can think of something better for them. And so, yeah, I mean, the devil's always in the details, but as I said, when we write it all out is when we have to really look at exactly the words that are used.
And is there resources primarily that the state should implement or also resources that we should implement in that continuum of care when people go back into community settings?
Well, if we go back to work group 5 and 6, it was all of the above. It was before, during, and after, because we talked a lot about how you don't have a lot of locations that are appropriate for getting out too. And so we said all three.
So I would concur that you include all the recommendations,
Yeah.
both in and out.
I think what we're just saying though is it feels like we're blurring the work groups, like those recommendations are
They are
a
there.
part of it. They were just more robustly discussed in work groups 5 and 6.
And they weren't statutory changes, they were building out of resources and capacity.
And I'm just, again, not as well versed in all of this as you are. But it's not a new topic. I mean, this whole idea of people being in jail. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, I was on a workforce group, was supposed to be no longer than a few days. I know people have been in there for 15, 16 months.
Yeah.
I mean, that's awful. And what that does to their families and to this person who is just, in limbo this whole time, not knowing what's going to happen.
Right.
What does that do to your mental health? It's awful. So this is not new. I mean, we've been talking about this for years. So, keep moving it along because I think we have some really good suggestions in there and maybe this time, you never know.
Who would have thought we'd gotten 50 beds for Anoka?
Yeah, yeah,
I wasn't betting money on that.
that's impressive. Yeah.
Ready for the next part for discussion? We had, the language, the way it currently reads, and I don't have the commitment statute in front, but it basically reflects that the responsibility of finding less restrictive options is the patient and it's on the patient and the attorney. So we talked about that language and wondered about including the responsibility, adding in other people, whether it be the case manager or whether it be someone from forensic services or CIS or someone to also do that, because one of our discussions, we talked about, I mean, somebody shared that they, could try to have somebody call 80 different placements to see if they could get someone in. But maybe whether it be a discharge planner or someone who is really, really familiar with the resources in the state, alternative placement, I mean, all of that stuff, if that might be value added. But we talked about, again, there was no consensus on that. There was a concern about, about the resource and, would that really need to be a statutory change, or is that just like adding on resources? Because there's nothing that forbids other people getting involved now, but right now, that's the way the statute reads. It is the responsibility of the patient and patient's attorney. I would assume they'd be receptive to somebody helping them out, but if it's not a statutory change, I don't know if a physician would be supported to do that, and I know case managers are overworked, underpaid, high caseloads and all that. I know CIS only has limited number of people to do it, but if it was in
case managers' familiarity with this population and some of the resources that might be able to serve them, right? And we've got some counties where the MI&D commitments or some of the folks that are stuck in jail really are few and far between. And so they just don't have the day-to-day experience with it. And I think one of the discussions that we've had, in a couple points along this is resources or mentorship or kind of who to go to get information from folks who may have more expertise if it's a case manager's, first or second time working with a client with these particular needs. But in terms of what is happening, it's wonderful when it happens, but as a complaint-driven agency, we definitely hear those stories when it's not.
One other thing that came up recently for us is, we had changed the statute about, like the caddy waivers if you're in the hospital, so we wouldn't lose it after 30 days. But now we're hearing that if someone is in jail and it's 30 days, they lose their caddy waiver. Which I'm trying to figure out, like, I couldn't find it anywhere in the manual. And, they lose their Medicaid is suspended, not terminated. So that might also be something to change, because if you can actually get someone out sooner and it could be a caddy waiver, you're not having to start that process all over again. I couldn't find that anywhere in a bulletin or the manual. where it
We've
says that.
experienced that as well, so you're right
Yes.
that it's a rule. Yes.
But no one's been able to show it to me. I contacted John Conley too to say, can you tell me where this is? Because I can, so I don't know whether
Oh,
it's,
we can find it and get it to you, because we were just looking at.
yeah, no, that would be great.
Yep.
Because, you know, again, I think it's a barrier to getting someone back out,
Yeah.
which is why we changed it for hospitals and residential, because it was like, wait,
Right.
this doesn't make any sense.
The same practice of putting it on hold up to like the 120 days.
Right.
And on the flip side too, we've also just had such a struggle in every county I've worked in, getting min-choice assessments done in a timely manner.
So why would you want to start all over again?
Right.
Yeah.
But also the people who don't come in with a waiver, then their options are restricted. It can take 6 to 9 months,
Right.
and that's expedited to get the min-choice assessment done.
Yeah.
One of the last things that we talked about very briefly, again, in no consensus was, right now the statute reads that, we have to finalize the MI&D. The hearing should be held within the 14 days of the court's receipt of the written treatment report or within 90 days of the date of the initial commitment or admission. Unless these three, unless the court, the county attorney and the patient's attorney agree that it can be continued for up to a year. And just wondering, like, why, if anybody has, you know, that's a concern, maybe because the person does have an intellectual disability or a TBI, or it could be substance-induced psychosis that at the time, could we give them a little more time if people were saying, hey, I think it could be this, I think there's reason to say we don't need to finalize this right away. But there was not consensus on, you know, do all three have to agree? What if? Or could we add like the forensic examiner or someone else in there? And if they could present a case to say, we think there's some other circumstances we need to rule out. But I think, again, the fear was like dragging it out too long for the patient. And because until it's a final MID, they can't even petition the review board or move forward. So did I get that one right? Was that the main reason why we didn't support?
And it went back to the resources that
Yeah,
that might be more realistic if somebody were in a hospital setting, but they're sitting in jail.
yeah. Yeah. You ready for just our the resources needed that we identified? Some of them are piggybacking on what work group 5 and 6 said, but I'll just go through those quickly. We said expand resources on both the back end and the front end, looking at some type of facility that can help potentially avoid the MID on the back end. Places for crisis. Group does not want to see extension of the initial commitment for those who are in jail to have assessments within 60 days after arriving at the inpatient facility. But we were advocating more so that some people don't have to sit in jail again, so that they could be at a crisis facility or, you know, getting behavioral health services before that happens. But we know there's not resources for that right now.
Can I ask a question about that? So how much is it per diem in jail? I mean, if resources are going somewhere, they're going to jail. Can't they be redirected if we had these programs? Is that another potential way of looking at it?
Sadly, it is cheaper to be in jail
Yeah.
because
We don't get
you're not
anything.
getting daily mental health services. You're lucky if you get in once every 2 weeks.
Certainly.
Again, needing places to go for assessment when there are no FMH beds available. We need places for people to go that people are comfortable with specially trained staff after leaving FMHP. We had a very long discussion about, unfortunately, horror stories from people that have gone to places where there's high staff turnover. People are promised they're gonna be on a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 or something, and then we find out that the staffing weren't there, that placements weren't able to enforce that. We have some placements that have multiple homes. They maybe do an orientation when people first hire, but it's not, they don't get a lot of mental health education. There's not ongoing education. And we have people that are making $15 an hour that are sleeping on the job or quitting to go work at a Walmart or something for $18 an hour. And so acknowledgement that people that have been in the MSOX type homes or adult foster care that is with forensic staff have tended to do better. and be supported longer in the community. So advocacy, again, for resources that placements have better trained staff and have, good retention of their staff, not that quick turnover.
So that's rate increases.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really.
That or are people providing free training? I mean, us going out and providing more training, or, I mean, just anything we can to enhance.
Well, but if you looked at, you know, the MSAC's homes, you paid a whole lot more to the people
Right.
who work there. And so,
Benefits are great.
Yeah.
And they
right,
stay.
so, yeah, so that's gonna be very different. So rate increases, you know,
Yep.
and, you know, for specialized, I mean, we can call them specialized homes, right? So that you're able to actually hire the people who have experience and.
Right.
And that's why we talked a lot about like state homes in the work group, because state benefits, state training, state oversight, it just. Those people tend to stay. They don't have that turnover.
And I mean, aside from the training and the benefits, just inconsistencies in how people are supported across the state by private providers. There are some that are just phenomenal.
Right.
And there are some that really struggle, and if it's a specialized population that they're serving, who's got some additional oversight.
Right. And our last one was, the use potentially of some locked ERTS type facilities.
Which is there, but again, ERTs are usually for 90 days, although we talked about when it's forensic, it should go up to like 120.
Right. Or longer, I mean, but most, at least it used to be, a
It's
lot of
not-
places weren't willing to take that on to do the challenge and the appeal and. And, you know, many, our patients, hopefully at the time of discharge are leaving, they've met their treatment plan goals and are doing very well, and they don't need all the services. The traditional services that ERTs do. They need services, they need support, they need the next step to transition, but they don't need the.
Well, ERTs isn't meant to be.
Right.
ERTs is meant to be more intensive short term, which is those are the
Right.
folks like early on, not at that.
Right.
Or as a potential, option for revocation, like instead of
Right.
coming back to the forensic mental health.
Right.
And we talked about truly locked, not flex lock, not, it has to be, because we talked about if this was an option for avoiding an MI&D,
Right.
then it has to be locked in order for our criminal courts to feel comfortable enough to trust us to discharge them to a placement. That if they have a high assault or a murder charge, they don't want them going to an unlocked
Right.
facility.
Right.
Sure. And that's what the language when we passed it was.
Right, but they don't exist.
Well, and now we've got the CMS thing figured out, and so there's still money for a provider to come forward to take that to do it. So we're hoping now that we figured out the CMS thing. Because when Medicaid wouldn't pay for it, what provider is gonna come forward? You know, because unless it's run by the state, there's no appropriation.
Right,
So-
and what I'm saying is it doesn't exist right now, so we
Right.
don't know how well this will work. And going back to Cassie's point,
Yeah.
how good of a provider will step up?
But at least the language and the money is there, which is a step that we didn't have before.
And I think this kind of off the cuff here, but was something that I wanted to say to this group today. I just visited with my son. He's in this assisted living in Jordan. They have had, I mean, the building is old, to say the very least. And they have had, in the last 2 months, 2 different fires. And there's been, probably since he's been there, there's, not all of them have been real serious, but 5 different instances. And the safety of that building is really concerning. We're talking about new facilities, but we have to reinvest in some of these other ones. I mean, this place is archaic. And, you know, in the middle of the night, one elevator, they have to get all these people outside. What, the alarms didn't go off? A staff was running through the hallways to tell people to get up and get outside. One person had to frantically do this, and people are in wheelchairs. One elevator, get them down outside at 3 a.m. They sat out there until 5:30 in the morning. It's scary. I mean, this is another issue. So it's great talking about new facilities. Pardon me?
I mean, how does that even mean fire code?
Well, yeah, and even my son says they need to, he's talked to the administrator and said, why don't you give us a little lesson on how to even use the fire extinguishers. We should all,
Right.
you know, kind of be trained with, have some sort. And he had his headphone or his earplugs in because it's quieter for him to sleep. Well, he didn't hear the woman. He saw the lights flashing outside and then realized, oh, what's going on? And that's how he left. I don't know. It's sad. So yes, it's great. I mean, I'm all for all these new buildings, but I think they've just kind of put people in these places and hope for the best. And I don't know, seems to me it's ticking time bomb there.
They just passed legislation last year to start doing better licensing for assisted living.
They did.
Yeah, the last several years.
I know, and maybe they're doing everything they're supposed to do right, but it's,
That doesn't sound like it. but
it doesn't sound.
It's just saying,
So.
this, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there was a recognition, there was a problem with assisted living, and so.
Concerning.
No, it's good to know. Any questions or any other comments about?
I still think going back to the front end, right, before someone gets into jail, I think it's still. I think it's an issue, you know, one of the problems that we see all the time, and I know it falls under domestic issues, and that's why, but, you know, often it's the person. I mean, I just talked with the family over the weekend, you know, they called the crisis team. The team didn't come out for whatever reason, it was a metro area, so I don't know why, maybe they were busy. And then a couple days later, you know, he became even more psychotic and, you know, the mom was, you know, trying to get him to, you know, kind of calm down and he hit her and she called 911 and it's like, well, no, this is a felony. And so we're bringing you to jail. And so it's always, that part always I've struggled with because, and mom was like, don't take him to jail, bring him to the hospital. I don't want to press charges. I want him to get help. And I'm still really struggling with that piece because I don't think we're preventing enough people from ending up in jail in the first place.
And oftentimes they're calmed down by the time they get there and they could easily just go into the hospital and. Yeah. Some help.
But now he's stuck.
Yeah. Anything from folks online? Any comments, questions? Clarification? Gary, anything?
Nobody's said anything.
I know
Chat.
there was some slightly, a little bit of a technical issue. They couldn't hear us for a little bit, but it sounds like we're back on.
We are, yeah.
Okay, so should we go on to the next work, recommendations, Delane? And we'll, of course, will help out as well.
I sure hope so. Yes. So. I'm just gonna talk through kind of what I have and then I'll pause after each thing and if people from the group, I'll follow Robinson. So I haven't, so we worked on edits to the statute and, changes that were incorporated, include, they incorporated or they added we added chapter 611, which is a competency statute into the language. And to follow 611 path prior to the MI&D hearing, which pretty much, I think, tried to tease out a little bit of that, you know, what actually is appropriate for the MI&D commitment, and kind of highlighted and added like, if it's a developmental disability or traumatic brain injury as defined under traumatic brain injury statute to that section. So I'm going to ask others to talk on that for a minute if you want to, or is that a good summary?
Yeah, I think so.
Just to try to make it consistent and it makes sense. Like,
Yep, I'm also looking through the document here, and those of us, other people who work with us, in work would feel free to chime in. But one of the first, as Delane said, was under 253B18, the procedure. What we said was that we wanted to follow the 611 route by appointing a forensic navigator
I was gonna do that.
at least 60 days prior to the hearing. And what we said was, we pretty much, copy pasted the forensic navigator series, the definitions and what they do. It says the court shall appoint a forensic navigator to provide the services described in section 611, including development of a bridge plan to identify appropriate housing and services, and any of the referrals, resources, or recommendations the forensic navigator or court deems necessary. And the navigator shall provide such services until the commitment is finalized or dismissed, whichever comes first. Okay.
Do you think that there'd be any issues with that?
Well, we need more forensic navigators.
I know, right?
They've done pretty good in their first year, but, you know,
Gonna need more of those?
oh, yeah.
And I think that kind of like, as you were talking about it, yeah, as you were talking, one of the pieces that did not get sufficient traction, or maybe there wasn't agreement upon, was the case manager issue, right, that you talked
Well, the
about?
one where, it's up to the patient and the attorney to find. So this forensic navigator would be potentially a resource if, to see if there was a locked program somewhere.
Be
Yes,
simpler to fund targeted case management.
I'm sorry, what does that?
Well, you can't use Medicaid though.
Wouldn't it be simpler to fund targeted case management? I mean,
If you could
if
use,
you're using state dollars to fund forensic navigators, use state dollars to fund targeted case management.
Because the sheer volume that you would need to hire, I mean, it'd be massive. And I also, sometimes there is duplication.
Are you saying for the case manager? or
For
the
forensic navigators, like I mean, I think it's a great idea to add additional resources in. I just worry that it wouldn't be attainable. I know that they've got really lengthy wait lists and they're prioritizing what they can do right now because, I mean, the hiring would just be intense. And sometimes there's duplication in service then because you might have a county case manager who's called the 80 places and a forensic navigator also calling the 80 places. Isn't necessarily helpful unless they have centralized knowledge that is much different, which in some cases could be really helpful. So I think,
Yeah, they could work collaboratively.
I mean,
through the site.
But the real goal of forensic navigators in the initial kind of idea around it was especially for people with misdemeanors where they were gonna get discharged and not connected to anything. So it's really to stop that revolving door. So adding them on to people that you know are gonna be court ordered to treatment. I know it does take away a little bit from the original intent of forensic navigators.
but it could give it another set of eyes to evaluate and see what resources and what people need to be on that team to figure out what's in the best interest of that person. And
I
To
think-
be clear, are you talking about taking the same forensic navigators that are on 611? Or are you talking about creating a whole nother pool of forensic navigators?
either way,
Either one.
Either way.
Whichever is gonna get us the services.
yep. And I think for some of the counties who aren't able to provide a case manager or don't have the resources to do that, it would at least be something that's looking at that person and helping with that process.
Although I kind of like your idea, if someone already has a case manager and now you're not gonna get Medicaid dollars because they're in jail, to have it be state-only Medicaid dollars that keeps that person connected is,
right,
actually, I think I would almost prefer that.
they already have the relationship.
And if you find a less restrictive alternative, they're the ones that are gonna be out there working with them.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah,
But what does it do when they don't have a targeted case manager? Because it sounds like that's not consistent.
well, then I think it's the connecting to, then connecting to a forensic navigator, but then we're not duplicating services. But again, the original intent was so many of those people with misdemeanors didn't have a case manager. It was a revolving door in and out of the jail and the ER. This was an attempt to make sure we're gonna get you insurance, we're gonna get you a provider, we're gonna get you housing, all of those kinds of things to reduce the people returning to the jail.
I just offer that in that scenario, it's a minor thing, but then as we're thinking about what the certification standards for that role is and the qualifications, that we're not creating conflicting requirements, because we're seeing that in other service lines where we want them to be able to do both. But we've set it up so that they have to go through different training requirements, different certification standards, licensing, and then they end up being conflicting. So one person ends up, it's impossible to be able to do it all.
So even Delane, I think we
Yeah.
missed out this other part too, though, even before the forensic navigator coming into this picture. We also talked about if the person has pending criminal charges for which they've been found incompetent to stand trial, we would then, pause the process, and then we would then divert that to the 611 series. So that way it would very much closely mirror how we're doing with the incompetency to stand trial. Right now, with the MI&D and with this process, these are two parallel processes that could occur, but what we're saying, or what we're proposing, was that we would then pause this to completely be, resolved through the criminal court first. And then after that, we would look at whether or not this person, we would have to go to a finalized MI&D hearing or not.
And it gives a chance on the front end to really evaluate as to whether the competency is there, whether it's MI&D, or whether there's autism, home and community-based waivered services that might meet the needs of that person. So it would give that a little bit of a cause. So if those folks aren't stuck.
But with felonies, I'm just not sure court's willingness to do that.
Yeah.
And where would the person be during that time? Would they be at Anoka?
Jail probably.
Well, because anyone who's deemed incompetent to stand trial. And then if they go forward with the commitment, but now the court could just actually order them to treatment and not go through commitment. So.
Well,
Dr. Griffiths?
Yeah.
I think the intent, behind what we up with came from the review of, processes that are carried out in other states. And so, the other states use competency to stand trial as it acts as a sort of filter on, what's been referred to as kind of a SRB cap process in perpetuity being applied. And so, Minnesota kind of puts the cart before the horse in the sense that we put that MI&D in place. That MI&D plate can be put in place at any time during that process, and then it becomes sort of a label that person carries perpetuity, and it becomes a state liability as well with perpetuity. And I think that generally allowing for a process when people have high-level felonies for the process of competency attainment to play out. And now with 611, there is a means that considers public risk, it can consider public safety, that allows for competency attainment to be pursued. Because not all individuals that are charged with a criminal offense that are found not competent necessarily require a treatment or forensic facility. Oftentimes, you're trying to figure out the role of substances. Sometimes we have intellectual disabilities or other things that person may be earmarked for another, or a neurodevelopmental disorder, but that's somebody that is potentially competent and could be found competent to stand trial. And so I just think that's a lot of the issues that we see in our facility with medical appropriateness and use of resources and people kind of being stuck in our facility or not being able to kind of move forward. comes from the process of this MI&D was applied prior to us really making good faith efforts to attain competency. And so I think that was the goal behind 611, requiring that the criminal court pursue a 611 process until such time that either that person is found unlikely to be restored in the foreseeable future or non-restorable in some literature source we look at. Or a situation where they are looking to dismiss those charges. Or a situation where that person is found competence to stand trial. And then those charges can then be moved forward, and somebody can still be committed as mentally ill and dangerous coming out of DOC or elsewhere, but I think allowing sort of that criminal process to play out first. And that would still, if you pursuing a 611 process would not preclude that person from being placed in our facility. So 611 still allows for 611 patients. I mean, once again, that's how a lot of other states in the forensic system work, is that the person's not competent to stand trial in the criminal court, sends them to a facility like that. So in many ways, it would create more options for individuals, because what happens now, and we have people on our wait list currently that have an MI&D in place that would probably benefit from treatment in Anoka or even treatment in our environment, but there are 50 people in front of them on the list with and so we are not able to bring that person in to provide stabilization, provide competency attainment services, because we're stuck servicing our wait list. And that person's precluded from being stabilized in any other environment besides our, by virtue of that money.
But let's be clear, everybody who's incompetent is not committed and therefore is not going to a forensic mental health treatment program, a DCT program. The vast majority are not committed. So you're talking about a smaller percentage, and Ramsey, it's about 25% are committed. Of those, not all of those are going to a DCT placement. And of those, we commit in Ramsey County at most 10 people MI&D a year, and that's really high. I don't think 10 is what we're doing. I think it's more like 5. So what you're talking about is 1% of 1% of 1%. I think where I'm getting lost a little bit is, yes, there's 611 stuff. Yes, some of that is starting to get built out, and talk about unfunded mandates. There's no funding for competency attainment programming other than the forensic navigators. And so to say that the criminal court should just deal with all those persons, it's just not realistic. But regardless, that's not the population that's hitting our MI&D world. It's the very small, very small, very small percentage where 2001 and MI&D.
But what precludes the criminal court from pursuing a 611 process for that very small percentage of it?
Because they haven't.
For a period of 2 to 3 years until we determine whether they could attain competency.
I'm still worried about where those people would have to be for the 2 to 3 years, because
Well, 611 still takes into account the person's individual needs. So if the court it's up to the court to determine whether they're to use validated risk assessment tools and the opinion of the examiner to determine whether that person should be released, whether that person should pursue competency attainment while in a jail setting, or whether that person should come to a DCT facility to get stabilized on the medications, to get inpatient competency attainment treatment. So, I'm not saying that the person it just allows, 611 allows the flexibility to get the person the things that they need without applying the indeterminate lifelong process to that individual.
But by statute allows it. In reality,
Well, I know the statute allows it, but I
But in
think it's a
reality-
great way to deal out resources by using just because the statute allows it. I mean, we're happy to take whoever you guys can send our way, and we'll deal with them. But we're going to continue to have an extensive wait list. And so I don't know, you know, I'm just trying to propose a process that allows for the resources that we do have to be allocated to the individuals that benefit from those resources being applied. Because forensic, not everybody needs a forensic treatment facility in perpetuity. And so I think allowing that to kind of just continue. And once again, I don't want to sound like I get the sense that maybe you feel attacked by this. I'm not saying that Ramsey County is sending all these people that are not appropriately from MI&D to our facility or anything like that. What I'm saying is that all it takes is a handful of folks that are inappropriately finalized as MI&D. And whether that was 10 years ago or whether that was 5 years ago in some county up north or whatever, all that takes is a buildup of that in the system over time to where we no longer have any beds and we have a wait list that is, 50 people long. That given current trends of admissions and discharges is gonna, it takes at least 1.5 years to service that 50 to 60. So it's really about allowing more time to filter out the individuals that really need sort of a lifelong commitment process. And so, like, for example, California has a similar process, but competency comes first. But then once if the person is found not restorable to competency, but they still remain dangerous, they have like this Murphy conservatorship. And there's, I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 people in the entire state of California that have a Murphy conservatorship and are subject to forensic treatment and monitoring in perpetuity, that sort of process. And so I'm not saying that it's unreasonable to have to bring that process to bear on a case. I just feel like we need to sort out a lot of things, including the criminal charges oftentimes the high level charges, because what we end up with is people that are kind of sitting in our facility 2-3 years down the line, still going back and forth through the criminal process, and it just ends up being a bed. So sometimes they do end up going to DOC. But sometimes the MI&D commitment is often used and I've seen this happen where it's used as sort of, basically that, well, they're locked up anyways, so they might as well just stay in the forensic hospital. And oftentimes they're not an individual that needs the plethora of resources that we provide from a psychiatric perspective. And so I think that's, once again, I mean, I'm all for shoot for the moon and let's ask for all the resources and all the other things. And once again, I'm with you guys on that. I just, given our current environment and cuts to Medicaid and all these other things, like I just don't see us producing another forensic facility anytime soon. And so if we continue to use the resources in the fashion that the statute allows for, it is not a sustainable process. Like we have outstripped our, and that's despite us expanding our bed pool, our secure treatment bed pool, year over year, every year since I started working there 7 years ago. So it has been something that we have continued to expand, and I think that is likely to continue under the current circumstances.
And I just want to be clear, I wasn't offended. I'm just frustrated because what I hear is criminal court do more. That is not my world. I'm civil commitment.
Sure.
And criminal court do more. There are 0 jail-based competency programs in the state. There is 1 inpatient competency attainment program in the state. This is not just criminal court, you figure it out, because what that ends up being is our poor guys sitting in jail getting nothing. And that's why I'm passionate about it, because I'm tired of these guys sitting in jail. And so I can't just sit here and say 611 figure it out, because it's not going to. It's not going to change what we civil commitment people do when we see somebody languishing in jail who has serious offenses, who's not well, and hasn't been well for some time. Can I finish, please? Thank you. And so I don't want to see that them languish when we have an avenue to get them treatment, to get them supports. And the commitment court determines an MI&D is appropriate, then they should go to St. Peter. And that's all I'm saying.
And I think we're with you there, Anne, and you know, when you say you don't want to see more patients in jail, we don't either. And I think that's why we're all here, right? In the task force is to look at all kinds of barriers and what would make the most sense. And so this is one of the recommendations that came out, is that could we leverage the existing 611, which I agree with you, there isn't enough funding for navigators. There isn't, you know, like you said, there's only one inpatient program right now. We just have a limited number of navigators. And we're still hopeful that the system will build and that we will continue to go on this trend, because not doing anything is also not, you know, is not a possibility right now. We have to look at, you know, outside the box thinking here. Go ahead, Doctor.
And I guess what I would say as well is that the literature would indicate that most people restore to competency in a 6 to 12 month period. And so, if we can bring ACT resources to bear on that competency process through an inpatient admission, to get that person competent, yes, they may spend some of their time in jail. But I think where we're at right now, particularly once that MI&D is in place, is that we can't bring any resources to bear, because there's all these other folks that are in front of them on the list. And so the reason my thought in bringing 611 into play is not necessarily to put it on the criminal court to say, hey, like, you need to solve this problem long term, but it's to say, it's to allow us to be able to allocate inpatient resources to those that are in greatest need of those inpatient treatment resources. And I know that there's a lot of discussion around sort of folks that are mentally ill in jail. And I think that there are degrees of that. For those that actually work in the jail setting, there are degrees of mental illness within a jail setting. And so there are folks that really need sort of targeted hospital care resources. And then there are folks that are either stable on medication or they're doing okay in Gen Pop. And yes, and there are some folks that I think are destined for DOC, that there is another system that has claim on them. And just because the person has a mental illness does not necessarily mean that they can't have any responsibility to the criminal justice system. And I think being allowed to sort of bring civil commitment into play so early on in the case oftentimes commits the case to a direction that is not, you know, what ultimately I think is what the court would have determined if it hadn't been brought up. So once again, I know I talked a lot and I'm sorry to interject, but that's.
So my concern, because I'm working with a woman right now whose boyfriend was killed by someone in a psychotic state. I mean, and then she heard that, you know, he was deemed incompetent. And she's like, well, now he's going to get off. Now he's going to be back in the community, not understanding that there would be, you know, another thing. And so I also want us just to think about for some of the victims, how we also talk about this, right? Because she felt better when I said, no, he's probably going to get committed as MI&D and, you know, and he's not going to get out tomorrow or anything like that. So I don't know if you're differentiating between, you know, the type of crimes that someone commits, but I think some are more difficult than others, and that we need to be careful what we're saying there too.
Well, but wouldn't that victim also, there are some circumstances where the person carries some responsibility in the victimization, and we have a criminal justice system to address that. And so I think, to me, it does a disservice to justice to necessarily not pursue a competency attainment and pursue civil commitment instead, which then sort of gets used as a means to serve as that person sort of bargains out in whatever is something like that. So I think that there is a I think there's a discussion to be had about that as well. Like I do think that And that's why a lot of other states that I've worked in, I think it's really the opposite problem is that there are times where we're like, this person needs to go to a state facility and this is the right option, and everybody is banging the drums, this person did something horrendous and they need to go to prison forever for it. And so I don't necessarily want to be in that camp, but when it comes to allocation of resources, I think that there has to be a balance between sort of that civil and criminal system. And 611 allows us to allocate the hospital level treatment resources to those that are in greatest need when they need it, and then allows for that continuum of care or discharge back to another safe setting, whether that is jail, or whether that is another placement, once that person has been treated. Whereas right now, our options are, because everything's just completely saturated, is to kind of just have them wait their turn until they can get in.
I think though that continuum of care continues to be the concern because like Anne was mentioning, those resources aren't there. So if we have people in some counties going through 611, like we might have some who are then waiting to go maybe to Anoka. We might have people who are, again, sitting in jail because we have no local options in the jail, nothing outpatient. And then if it is determined maybe with expertise that somebody could be discharged and maybe they're in the community, I think in theory, that's a great idea, but a lot of times all we're doing in those situations are creating gap cases. So like I've worked with somebody who went through they went through the process, they were found incompetent, they were found to not need to be in a secure setting, so they were discharged to the community. They were in the community for 2 years with nobody assigned to be responsible to them. They had optional case management services, optional go to treat to competency services. So the person didn't follow through, they were ill in the community and they had nobody to be able to help them. So I would just want to be really thoughtful that we're not actually creating more gaps in different areas or creating disparity in services across the state where we don't have those options available to us. So I think that one would need a lot more discussion.
Yeah, and we can present if we can even make copies of the recommendation, what you're talking about, Cassie. These people would not just be dismissed, right? Because these are the initial MI&D commitments, right? So they already have that initial MI&D commitment. And what the proposal is that if in addition to that, they are found incompetent to stand trial, they would go down this route. But then again, all of those other things for MI&D would still hold true, right? You can't just dismiss the MI&D petition. You would have to go through the entire process there. So just wanted to say that.
I think this is one where we all need to see the words.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I'm not even following it, to be honest.
Yeah, because we spent so much time telling the criminal court to stay out of our cases. I don't want to do the opposite and then say commitment's gonna interject on the criminal case. We did a lot of work to get the 2004 removed from rules so that there's no commitment at the same time as incompetent or as an incompetence time. We took the language out to mandatorily refer to commitment, like we are trying to create separation between these two worlds, not bring them together. So I just hesitate. I'd like to see the language, but I hesitate to believe that this is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think discussing it more, we're not gonna get any clearer. So I think, I personally need to see it written down to really fully understand it.
Okay. And maybe we can take a short break. We'll take a break. We're due for a break. So we'll be back in 10 minutes, which is 2:35. And then I have a short presentation. It's in your handouts here too, but I just wanted to do the short presentation. Okay, thank you.
So I just forwarded you that source for your question.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just wrap up the last two recommendations. I think Delane is just going to talk about it, and then I'll do a short presentation.
Okay.
Before we wrap things up for the day. So go ahead, Delane.
Okay, so the other thing that the group did is we wanted to add, in a subdivision 3A, where in appeals, we're gonna say patients may appeal to the Minnesota Court of Appeals following an indeterminate commitment at any point. So just to put the right to appeal in the statute and make that very prominent. And then
Right now, there is no mechanism of appeal for MI&D patients at any point. It is there for MI commitment, which is much less restrictive in the sense that it's just for 6 months, but then for MI&D, which is an indefinite commitment, there is no appeals language. We do want to say that I think for MSOP as well, there is an appeals language. And it's just kind of interesting that the MI&D may have fallen through the cracks there. But we wanted to introduce that.
Isn't it in 0.23 subdivision 7?
There is a process. I believe there is a process for MI&D appeals. Is there not?
Division 7. We looked for it high and low, and I don't think we found it.
Adjustment under section length may be appealed within 60 days. 253B.18 subdivision 1 may be appealed within 60 days after the date of the order entered. 253B.23 subdivision 7.
Yeah, I know examiners work on cap level MI&Ds.
Okay, this is something that we'll have to go through again, because we did look into this and we could not find any language. So we're definitely look into
does anybody in the room ever have any experience or knowledge of somebody appealing an MID commitment and being successful in the early stages, or
I don't have is it initial
or even not
final, they can appeal the final MID commitment or the initial?
It is
maybe that's
subdivision 1 and 2, so both.
Okay.
Could it be that any agreed party is confusing and people don't think it's them? This isn't it.
I have MI&T appeals all the time.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's not the executive board or any other agreed party. Board of Appeals from.
We have not yet, because we have not encountered that.
Is that different than going to the SRB to get the D dropped?
Correct.
Yes.
It's different.
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
appealing to ever being labeled MI&T.
I
So
see.
you can appeal either phase. You have to wait till after the second phase to appeal either phase, but you can appeal either phase,
Okay.
the 1 or the 2.
So we'll look into that more, but the proposal was at any point too, so that maybe that to be continued, we'll come back with that. And then the last thing, which is kind of simple, and I hope there's some agreement here, is we're taking out the language under subdivision 5 and subdivision or subdivision 5 that says is capable of making an acceptable adjustment to open society, and replacing that as no longer a danger to the public. And then the other place we're just taking out, will enable the patient to adjust successfully to the community. Just taking those out. And then there's another section under the discharge under subdivision 15.
This is Dr. So you're saying that you wanted to say it's no longer a danger to the public, or that's the part that's going to get taken out?
Part that's getting taken out is capable of making an acceptable adjustment to open society. We just had a consensus that that language
And you said replace.
should either be taken out. We're taking it out of subdivision 7 under provisional discharge. I think that's A, last sentence of A, and then take it out of 15. And in 15 would take out both the capable of making an acceptable adjustment to open society and take out and is no longer in need of treatment and supervision, because some of our folks
Still need to.
treatment and still need supervision in the community. So we thought both of those need to get out of that.
And did you say you were gonna add is no longer dangerous?
On the subdivision 7A, add is no longer a danger to the public.
But how is that defined? Danger is historically, when you commit a violent act that is dangerous, that makes you more likely, period, to be more dangerous in society. That's just the way it is. So I would really struggle with some of that wording, and I think that needs to be discussed further. And again, I think it's hard because I don't have it in writing. I'm a more visual person, so if some of this can be just in writing, I think I could probably better articulate my concern about that. But
Yeah, we can send that out.
Yeah,
It does make sense to say that, no longer needs treatment because people are gonna need treatment, still in the community, we want them to. So that seemed like a very odd phrase in that.
And to Dr. Lindeman's point, the no longer dangerous to the public already exists under subdivision 15, and there is case law that kind of helps narrow it.
Okay.
did you hear that? So, folks on the line?
yes, thank you.
So I kind of feel like the next step for the groups is really to kind of present things like the background, why the actual language change, so that we can all see that, and it'd be much easier to weigh in.
And maybe provide that to everybody, and then when we come back to the table,
Yes.
I'll have to schedule in some additional reading time and review time.
All right, so in your handout, you do have a couple or maybe 4 or 5 pages of handout here. I know in a lot of the work groups, and then even when we first started talking about the task force, there were a lot of questions about how many individuals are you talking about who don't meet, because I think we were talking about how the resources that we have, some of it is strapped because of the patient population that really don't need to be inside a secure setting. So we went back and did some research. So we have the data here. Technology.
What if it might not be on either. It's on the side.
Oh, yeah, it is. Oh, never mind. Yes, I hadn't turned it on. Okay, so this is the slide that I had shown back in the day last August now, and this is just looking at the number of commitments that have been ordered. And then even within our work group, when we presented this data, this was corroborated through the Minnesota Judicial Branch data, where there's been 77% increase in the number of commitments that have been ordered since 2014. So you can see that trend line right there. And then we also looked at historically, in the last 3 calendar years, we've had 244 admissions, we've discharged 234 people. And you can look at the number of referrals, that's 325 in 3 years. So this is where we really have to dig in into our caseloads. We looked at our patients who currently do not meet the severe persistent mental illness language. We have 13% of that. That equals 40. Data here, we have 48 patients that are, that's 13%, because we have, I think the average number that we used for the census was 365. And then within that 13%, within the 48 patients, we have the breakdown is like this. So we have 22 patients who have a sole diagnosis of an intellectual disability or a neurodevelopmental disability. 13 patients with personality disorder alone, not in conjunction with a major psychiatric disorder like mood or psychotic disorder. And then 7 patients with an acquired neurocognitive disorder. And then fiscally, we also wanted to take a look at how much this is costing us, or did cost us, I would say, because we were able to take a look at the patients that have been discharged that did not meet the, severe persistent mental illness language, and 3 patients. So our average cost of care that we calculated was going to be about $256,000 a year at FMHP. I'm just gonna corroborate my numbers here. Yeah, $256,139. So we had one patient who was with us for 38 years, so you can see how much that cost us over the years. That's a lot, and we really wanted to show that because I think that's important for us as we're making some, recommendations for resources. And so if we're not spending resources elsewhere, this is where we're spending on as well. And then also wanted to look at, returns from PD, because again, there was some talk about, these are patients who have a high history of violence. What is the rate of recidivism? How often do they commit crimes when they go out, and how often do they return to us? And you can see that since 2000, I don't have the year, since 2015, the percentage has sort of vacillated between 6 to 9% last year. So it's stayed pretty consistent despite the increasing number of provisional discharges in the community. And in the next slide, I also wanted to show that since 1980, we've had 1.5% of our individuals on PD status who have been convicted of a felony. So that is a pretty, again, I don't want to minimize because 1.5% again is 1.5%. But in the grand scheme of things, time and again, what has been shown is that this population, actually, their risk of violence is much less than that of the general population. And our numbers also show that.
Dr. Ratton, do you have any numbers on how many were charged with felonies? As you said, convicted.
Yeah, I think we can look into that as well. I don't think it was a high number. But yes, we can look into that as well.
And I would suggest in 1980, there was hardly any community services available. Maybe just looking at the last 10 years versus since 1980, I think would give us a better, more clear perspective about what numbers we're really talking about.
Makes sense, yeah.
And I correct me if I'm wrong to protect Russia, but we did take a look at it sort of a recent time window as well. And we have those numbers around that kind of 6 to 8% of people returning to our campus. And I don't know if we have those numbers on the slide, but a good majority of them were not returning to our campus due to recidivism of any kind. There were a handful, there was some recidivism, and then felony level recidivism was even a smaller proportion of that, and then violent felony level recidivism, even smaller proportion. But we do have, those are the ones that make the papers, and I understand that. But when compared to a similar risk cohort from a facility like DOC or some other place where they sort of similar set of risk factors, the proportion of folks that recidivate is quite low on an annual basis.
Yeah.
It'd be good to have that broken out. I think
Yes.
that would be helpful.
Yes, and now that you say it, I do remember seeing that, and I don't know why I didn't put it in this. We'll take a look.
I know we talked about them, and I just don't know if there's a way to kind of frame them up so they can next case.
I'm sorry that I missed it. Are we talking about recidivism on provisional discharge?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so they're still within
And
the supervision.
and we're
Go ahead.
comparing the rate of recidivism of those folks on provisional discharge to who? In order to say they're not at higher risk, much higher risk?
Not the risk of recidivism, we're talking about the rate of violence in the general community.
Okay.
That's not, I think it's not in the chart. That was just verbal. And so I think we just have to clarify that.
Yeah, I think it's just to sort of put in put some numbers around, because I think that there is a perception that those that are under supervision in the community have some sort of astronomical risk of violence. But when you compare them to a demographically similar group of individuals, those that are being released from DOC, there is not an elevated risk of recidivism. And so just, I think that's what we're.
I don't know that I totally agree with that conclusion. Obviously, I haven't looked deeper into the numbers, but we're comparing folks that are getting intensive services to manage their risk. I mean, I think that's what provisional discharge is intended for. And so to say that they're not at a higher risk, it's simply maybe that their risk is being effectively managed, might be how I would phrase that.
Yes, yes, and but, I think it's important to put that distinction out there because there is, we do see those kinds of numbers being thrown out, even at the special review board hearings from counties all the time, this person can't go back because of the, crime that they committed, they're gonna recidivate again. So I think this is important for us to talk about here because that provides the context right there. They are going to be on intense supervision, so they're not gonna be, just simply being let out into the community without any other monitoring.
Not sure the general public knows what type of services are.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to be careful about the language we're using, and not just saying that they're not at increased risk compared to X, Y, and Z.
I guess what I'd say is that if I'm coming out of the DOC because I killed my number, I don't have to demonstrate any reduction of risk from that perspective, and yet my risk of recidivism is quite high. And so I just think that it's important to be thoughtful about the standard that we are holding this population to, simply because the law allows us to do that, and to push back on the perception that because I oftentimes hear, well, you guys are letting people out too soon, things are not, but the data does not bear out that assertion, and so I don't know where cases where people are, I think that the press around that would have us believe that that's the case, but that is not part of our data anyway, and I think we should be much more concerned about individuals that are that don't have mental illnesses that are being released into the community after completing a prison sentence.
Well, I think that's a whole different, I'm gonna be honest, a whole different discussion. So when we're going to the legislature on this issue, they just need to know that actually the provisional discharge is largely working because of the services and support you have, and I would only focus on that data. I would not go, I just would not go to the other one at all.
I think
I would agree. Yeah.
First to compare it the other way. And then if anything,
I would agree too. I think it must.
It'll have the opposite effect, and they'll say, well, maybe more people should be MI&D because it seems to reduce the risk. So we don't want to go on that slope.
It's a different committee too, so I just wouldn't bring it in, to be honest.
Okay, that's fine.
It's good to know though.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. It's great to know.
Okay, so those were the slides that I had here. Any other discussion? Any first thoughts, reactions? Is this something that folks were anticipating? Did you think this was an aha moment or or this is something that you knew?
Is there any data as to time frame as to when these were committed? Because it would be interesting to know if it was back more recent, if it's outstate counties, if it's in-state counties. It's enough that I think it's an issue, but I want to know where I would not have been successful committing somebody with just a personality disorder, unless it was borderline personality disorder. So I'd just be curious where the breakdown was.
Someone was 38 years old, so.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And if all of them were 30 or more years ago, then I start to go, okay, did we get better?
Yeah, two of those three categories wouldn't even, I wouldn't even be able to support as an examiner in MI&D if someone was solely presenting with ID or personality disorder. I was curious about the same thing. Or were those diagnoses later after maybe initial symptoms had resolved due to something else?
Yeah, they had a crummy examiner. We've had quality exams.
Definitely. Yep.
And a lot of folks that shouldn't have been licensed doing exams. So that does happen and has happened in the past.
Yep.
I think that there was some information about the length of stay of individuals. But I don't think we broke those down by counties. I mean, I think with 48 individuals, once again, my guess is that it would probably break down to be somewhat representative of sort of all the counties, but I don't know if we could necessarily be able to we'd have a large enough sample size to say, hey, like, these are mostly greater Minnesota.
Yeah, it's peppered throughout the years. I'm just looking at the raw data. We have someone who's been admitted since 1993 to all the way to 2025. So it's a wide range. It's not just, looks like 2015 and 2015, and then 2020, looks like we've had the largest number of people being admitted. And this is only for the neurocognitive impairment. So it's not even like all three buckets. It's just for that one bucket. But I will keep looking, and I don't have it broken down according to county, but we could do that as well. It won't be a big deal.
I'm curious, this might just be my mind not doing the math appropriately here in this meeting, but you said 48 people? Where are the other 6? Because I'm seeing 42. I'm just wondering, was there a 4th category that was just, you know, a sort of variety, or did they all fall in there? Just trying to think through what would have been those other 6 people.
Yeah, I'm trying to compare because there were 2 sets of data that I was toying around with.
Well, we can come back to it. I think this information should be included in the report, you know, so, you just. Do that.
Anything I think it may be helpful, and we talked about this at prior meetings too, of like it's numbers to resource requests, right, that we're talking about, of like what type of settings would be valuable for folks, and this is a general representation of how many folks may otherwise benefit from alternative settings.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
That is a good idea.
We're not talking hundreds.
Yeah, and I also just think it kind of, it sort of, it kind of encapsulates the mathematics of it, that it really doesn't take that many sort of extra folks to really, because really, I mean, if you look at, you know, we call 42, 48, I mean, it's sort of our wait list right now. And so, you know, we're able to sort of more efficiently manage cases. I think we would be able to do that. So I think that's, you know, it's a one-off that happened in 2000, and then it was another one-off that happened in 2005, and then it was a bad examiner up north in 2015. But after a while, that just sort of accumulates and snowballs until you have sort of a lot of folks, because it really does. I know it's a judicial determination, but it also earmarks that person for state resources kind of in perpetuity. And so I think another reason to kind of be thoughtful before that and have a filtration system in place before that is actually fine.
For me, it highlights the discharge process, like, I mean, the reasons for why some of these individuals may not have been able to discharge yet might vary, and I don't know if that could be grouped in somewhere, like, is it lack of available resources in the community? Is it maybe a handful of people who really aren't safe yet, and so some type of long-term level of care is still needed? Like, I think that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, our average length of stay actually has gone down significantly. You know, when I first started in the system, we used to say 10 years just in the secure perimeter. And now our average length of stay within secure and non-secure combined is less than 5 years. So, you know, that's a pretty big dent that we've been able to achieve. And of course, with the help of counties as well. But again, you know, I'm not sure that further reducing the length of stay is going to help as much as how can we develop more resources in the community, like you said, Cassie.
Right, because I hear that the length of stay goes down, and then I tour and I see people that I worked with there like 16 to 20 years ago. And I feel like, ooh, and I know some of those people might be people that are in this data. And I wonder, what are the resources that would be needed to support them safely
Mhm.
somewhere else?
And it is, you know, when you look at lumping, which kinds of people are gonna have a harder time getting out, it is those people with intellectual disability who will need more supports, like a 4-bed or a 1-bed, you know, kind of a facility. People with sex offenses and people with high profile crime. So, you know, we already have that. And again, it's going to take a lot of partnership with the counties as well on this, because it's not just us willing to do the walk. I think there has to be, yes, some.
The customized living.
Yes, exactly. Because again, at the end of the day, it is money as well, and public, you know, safety.
Yeah, I think one thing that would be really helpful is to get, an estimate of what an MSOX home would be. For an individual or even a 2-person setting, and then also for a typical home and community-based waiver for a 1-person or a 2-person. And put this in line, I think with just some of the, maybe for legislators that might. I mean, I think, we're all here for the reason to make it better, to try to make proposals to make improvements. But when you've got 42 or 48, that number maybe for legislators isn't gonna seem that big. For me, it seems too big. But if we can put a number to it of what resources would and how they compare to what we're paying at the Forensic Mental Health Program already, that might be a really nice thing to add to the report too, so they can look at those comparisons, and that could lead to the push for those resources and the funding for those resources.
Or like the individual that you mentioned, that there might be 13 or 14 people who could be on the unit, but instead it's one person.
Yes.
What type of resources would be able to support that individual in the community and then compare costs there as well?
Yeah.
Dr. Rogers, for the personality disorder, is that just antisocial or are you including borderline in there?
Yes. All of those personality disorders just solely by themselves and not in conjunction with any of the, you know, psychotic or mood disorders.
Because borderline personality disorder has been found to be a serious and persistent mental illness and has been considered for mentally ill and dangerous. So I don't know that that really fits this parameter here.
So is borderline included in personality disorder?
They are, but then again, we do have, and I'm not saying that we only have 13 patients with borderline personality or antisocial personality, right? We have a lot more than this. But this is the population that only has that. Whereas, you know, the other, when we're looking at the morbidity and more resources that are needed, that is the population that would have a comorbid, you know, schizoaffective or any kind of, you know, psychotic disorder as well, in addition to the borderline personality.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, as far as the definition of mental illness and who qualifies for a serious and persistent mental illness, borderline personality disorder is included in that.
Yeah, so I would say the majority of those folks are antisocial personality or narcissistic personality disorder. A handful of borderline personality disorder that does not rise to the level of day-to-day impairment and support needs that is sort of a stable. So I do think there's a couple of folks that are in there. I think those that are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder to where they're reasonable people could disagree about whether their borderline personality disorder is separate mood disorder in and of itself. I do think you're right, though, like borderline's when they kind of straddles the line between severe, and since we don't really have any clinical words in statute, and we're all kind of just going by a case law that's been done in the past. There are a couple of folks I think that on the basis of borderline personality disorder would not be folks that necessarily necessitate a secure treatment facility, but be supported with an alternative setting.
And I'm just saying, I don't think it should be, if these numbers were to be included in the report, I don't think anyone who's in the personality disorder group here, the 13, if they're solely borderline, I don't think those numbers should be included because they do qualify as a serious and persistent mental illness. Otherwise, we're conflating terms.
Yeah, we can look that up. And then I just got from my data person here that it was 42.
Okay.
So 6 people had since they were discharged or I think 1 person did pass away.
That is so helpful. I was just racking my brain thinking, is there a fourth category of people that it's just not occurring to me? Thank you.
No, so.
And I think it's fine if you want to, cut out the couple folks that we have in there. I just would say just because we can commit somebody doesn't necessarily, and we can place them in St. Peter in perpetuity doesn't mean we necessarily should, or that that's the most appropriate, or best use of resources for that. So.
No, but I think saying that they're it's more antisocial is gonna be more important as we present the information to the legislature.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Slides one more time for folks to. Okay, not hearing anything else. Next steps. So I know that we do have that one additional task that's been added to our task force. How do folks want to proceed with that? Should we put that on the side and then, do that later?
Let's do it later. Yeah, I think we should finish this part up first, and then that's gonna be a short discussion, honestly. I think it's,
I think we should finish on what we've been focused on.
Okay.
If we need more time for the other one later, we can always ask for it, but I think we're so deep into this, it will be taking a step back.
and we've got another year, so there's gonna be plenty of time.
That's the short timer.
You're well finished, no problem.
Okay, so then for next time, what do we want to focus on?
I think the subgroup's really writing things up. I had sent out a possible, outline, right? So I think we need to start filling it in. And then I think really it's like reviewing the words, make sure that we are in agreement, as we're looking at it, we need to add something, because I think, we've talked about generally the stuff, but I think it's always the hardest when you get the words on paper. So I think that should be kind of the next step.
Any comments, any thoughts?
I'd also like to recommend that the next meeting be virtual. All of the construction is like a nightmare, just to be honest. I don't know what others think.
That's why I was late.
Yeah, me too.
I'd be fine with that. I just think getting things a week ahead of time, or at least 4 days ahead of time, for business days that we can review and be kind of ready to share and comment. It's harder virtual, but it's not easy to travel either.
It's hard hybrid too.
It is. It's hard to really get.
I mean, I think when we get down to being like nearly the final before adding a new thing, then we meet in person, because then as you're hashing things out, it's important, but I think it's probably do the next one virtual.
So the goal will be each work group to have their kind of write up to you all to send out like a 4 business a week.
Yeah, I'd say a week.
A week, so 4 business days before digest.
Sure.
But we're meeting to come up with our final, right? And then sending it out, need to send it before the next meeting, or you want a summary in advance?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, should we
I think there's
do a
clarifying.
work group meeting for next time so that people can write their stuff down? And then the next month we meet together to kind of hash everything out. Fine tune.
Which work groups are meeting though, because there were multiple. And
The ones that were presented today, the ones that we're focusing on. I think objective 5 and 6, you're already done, right? Yes. Yeah, so it's just the 2 work groups now. Does that sound okay? Because I think to hash things out, you really do need in-person energy.
So the next one is July 21st,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, so it's June, yeah, July. So then for August meeting, we could all meet together in person. You don't have to agree with me if you don't. Just throwing that idea out there.
We have an August date.
We don't yet.
We don't yet.
Yes, no, I need to schedule that. We've been staying every 3 weeks or every third Monday, so I don't know if that's still what we wanna do, but.
Remind me the exact due date of the report. Yeah. So that's what I,
was this year, wasn't it?
yeah, that's what I thought. So we have them.
They got extended.
Yeah, we've got plenty of time, and so I think that giving some time for the groups to really come together and get on the same page there makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so we'll schedule another meeting in August. So for the July meeting that you have all in your calendars, let's put that there and then have our work group meetings, write things down. For August, we'll meet again in person, hopefully in this location or wherever we can find it. And then we'll really talk about it there. Okay. But thank you all today for the discussion.
Okay.
Pleasure to see you.
Pretty much.
Oh my God. That was an hour.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be.